Shalom. I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to the Hebraic Heritage Ministries Yeshiva Discipleship Program. And in this teaching, we are doing a series on Torah and the New Testament. And this teaching focuses on what the New Testament has to say about food. And in doing so, we are going to cover those verses in scriptures which Christians often quote to try to make the claim that in the New Testament we are allowed to eat anything that we want, including pig and shrimp. And so some of the verses which we are going to give you a Hebraic perspective of includes Matthew in chapter 15 and verse 11, which says, "Not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles the man." So taking that verse at face value, it would seem to imply that Yeshua is saying that we can eat anything we want. Is that what he is trying to say? We're going to look at Matthew chapter 15 in context and understand the point that Yeshua is making. Then we're going to look at Acts in chapter 10, and this is Peter's vision, which also is often quoted to give claim that being New Testament believers in Yeshua, that we can eat anything that we want, including pig and shrimp. For in Acts chapter 10, in Peter's vision, verses 12 and 13, it says, "Wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat." So often this is quoted or referred to. And just by quoting those two verses, once again, it would seem to imply that Peter's given a vision to eat anything that he wants. Is that the context of how we understand Acts chapter 10? So we're going to look at the Hebraic context of this. And then in Acts, in chapter 15, there is a ruling that is given here regarding four things that are associated with the non-Jews and their obligations toward faith in Yeshua. And in Acts chapter 15, verse 20, it says that they should abstain from pollutions of idols, from fornication, from things strangled, and from blood. So we're going to look at that verse, and in particular, what it says about food. And then we're going to look at 1st and 2nd Timothy as well. So this is what we're going to be covering in this teaching, is to give you a Hebraic perspective and understanding of these verses and answering the question, what does the New Testament say about food? Are we allowed and permitted through the redemptive work of Yeshua when he shed his blood on the tree to eat anything that we want? Did Yeshua die on the tree so that his people can eat pig and shrimp? Is that the correct understanding that we should have of these scriptures? To begin with, we are going to see that the Torah specifies that there are those things that are clean and those things that are unclean. And those things that are defined as being clean, they are the biblical definition of food. Genesis in chapter 7 and verses 1 and 2, it is written, "And the Lord said to Noah, Come you and all your house into the ark, for you have I seen righteous before me in this generation. And every clean beast you shall take to you by sevens, the male and his female, and the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. So we see when Noah took the animals into the ark, there was an understanding that there were certain animals that were clean and others are unclean. In Leviticus chapter 11, verses 46 and 47, it is written, "This is the Torah of the beasts and of the fowl and every living creature that moves in the waters and every creature that creeps upon the earth, to make a distinction or a difference between the unclean and the clean, between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten." So the one that may be eaten is defined as being food. That which is not to be eaten is forbidden. We should not call those things that are forbidden food. So biblical food is that which the Torah permits to be eaten. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 6, it is written, "And every beast that parts the hoof and cleaveth the cleft into two claws and chews the cud among the beasts, that shall you eat." Regarding the fish in the sea, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 9, "These you shall eat of all that are in the waters, all that have fins and scales shall you eat." Regarding the birds and the fowls, Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 11, "Of all clean birds you shall eat." So the Torah defines clean beasts, clean fish, and clean fowls or birds that are permitted to be eaten. Now, the Torah also defines for us those things that are unclean or those things that are forbidden. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3, "You shall not eat any abominable thing." Leviticus chapter 11, verse 7, "And the swine, though he divide the hoof and be cloven-footed, yet he does not chew the cud, he is unclean to you." Leviticus chapter 11, verses 41 and 42, "And every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatsoever goes upon the belly, and whatsoever goes upon all four, or whatsoever has more feet among all creeping things that creep upon the earth, them you shall not eat, for they are an abomination." Leviticus chapter 11, verses 13 and 14. "And these are they which shall be an abomination among the fowls, and vultures are included in this list." The Torah commands that there be a distinction or a difference be made between that which is clean and that which is unclean. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 25. "You shall therefore put distinction or difference between clean beasts and unclean, between unclean fowls and clean. And you shall not make your souls abominable by beast or by fowl or by any manner of living thing that creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean." It is the duty of a priest to teach the difference between the clean and the unclean. Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 26. "Her priests have violated my Torah and profaned my holy things, because they did not put a distinction or a difference between the holy and the profane. Neither have they shown difference between the unclean and the clean." Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 15. "But the priests, the Levites, the son of Zadok, they shall come near to me to minister unto me. And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the profane, and cause them to distinguish or discern between the unclean and the clean." So with this background, seeing that the Torah tells us that which is clean and unclean among the beasts, among the fish of the sea, among the fowls of the air, and the priests are to make a distinction or a difference between the clean and the unclean, was Yeshua teaching in Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, was this a teaching that he was given his disciples that they, and thus we, can eat anything that we want? Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, where Yeshua says, "Not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles the man." So, looking at that verse in isolation at face value, one could read into that verse that he's saying that you could eat anything you want. But is that really what he is teaching? Is that the context of Matthew in chapter 15? So let's look at the context and see the point that Yeshua is trying to make here in this verse. We are going to now look at Matthew in chapter 5, verse 17, where Yeshua said, "Think not that I've come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I've not come to destroy, but to fulfill." And so in order to get a perspective of what Yeshua was teaching in Matthew chapter 15, particularly in verse 11, we want to see what he taught here in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. And ironically, this verse also is a verse that is often quoted to try to make the claim that Yeshua did away with following the Torah. And they interpret this by the way they see the word to fulfill the Torah. But in this same verse, Yeshua said, "Do not even think the thought that I've come to destroy the Torah or the prophets." Don't even think the thought that I have done this. But how do we really understand this verse? Well, in the book Understanding the Difficult Words of Jesus by David Biven and Roy Blizzard Jr. on page 154, they explain this verse in the Hebraic context by saying, the only solution to understanding this verse is to take the Greek back into the Hebrew. And once we set this passage in its Hebraic context, what is being said makes sense. In looking at this verse, undoubtedly, in trying to understand the meaning of it, everything hinges on understanding the phrase to destroy and to fulfill. What does Yeshua mean by destroy the Torah and fulfill the Torah? Destroy and fulfill are technical terms used in rabbinic argumentation. When a rabbi felt that a colleague had misinterpreted a passage of Scripture, he would say, "You are destroying the Torah." So in effect, incorrectly teaching the Torah and incorrectly following the Torah is destroying the Torah. And so if you're trying to explain to somebody what the Scripture says and you do it incorrectly, what good are you doing? You're actually doing harm to the text if you're trying to explain the text and you're doing it incorrectly. Thus, the term for that is you're destroying the text. You're destroying the Torah. So continuing with the explanation in the book Understanding the Difficult Words of Jesus by David Biven and Roy Blizzard Jr. on page 154, they explain what we see in Matthew chapter 5 verse 17 and following is a rabbinic discussion. Someone has accused Yeshua or Jesus of destroying the Torah or giving it an incorrect understanding and application. Of course, neither Yeshua or Jesus nor his accuser would ever think of literally doing away with the Torah or to teach it incorrectly, destroying the Torah. Furthermore, it would never enter the mind of the accuser to charge Yeshua or Jesus with intent to do away with following the Torah at all. what is being called into question is Yeshua's system of interpretation, the way in which he is teaching and the way in which he follows the Torah. Now, in understanding how we interpret or follow the Torah, it is seen that there are 4 primary levels to understanding a biblical text. And the first level is known as the Peshat, which means the simple meaning or the literal meaning. The second level is Remez. It means a hint, a suggestion. It means one scripture alluding to another. And you can do this by referring to a phrase of a verse that is well known. For example, Yeshua did this in John chapter 14, verse 15, when he said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." He was making a remez, a hint, a suggestion in the mind of his audience to Exodus chapter 20, verse 6, which says, "Showing mercy to thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments." So the third level is Darash, which to espouse the text, which is called Midrash, which means from the Darash, and parables are a form of Darash, and it's to draw out the meaning of the text is Darash. And then the fourth level is called Sod, and this is the hidden meaning, but the hidden meaning is the heart meaning. And you might think of this as the spiritual meaning of the text. And so these are the 4 primary levels in how we understand a biblical text. And if you take each of the 4 levels and the Hebrew words for the 4 levels, the first level being Peshat, the second Remez, the third Darash, and the fourth Sod, and you take the first letter of the Hebrew words of these 4 levels, you are going to get another Hebrew word, which is Pardes, which means orchard or garden. And so the teaching is that if we look at the text in the fullness of its meaning through these different prisms, you are going to get the full meaning of the text. And it's like being in a garden. It's like being in an orchard. You have grasped the fullness and the understanding and the richness of the text. In the book, From Exile to Redemption, Volume 1, page 158 by Rebbe Menachem Schneerson, he explains the following concept. The Sod, which is the hidden, the heart, and the deeper meaning of the Torah, that when Messiah comes, this is associated with the revelation and the understanding of the innermost or the deepest or the heart meaning of the Torah. So when Messiah comes, he's going to reveal and he's going to teach the Torah at the Sod, the heart meaning. And so this is the context which we need to understand. And this is the Hebraic mind in the first century regarding expectations when Yeshua is teaching his people in Matthew in chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15 verse 11 says, "Not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles the man." So what Yeshua is doing here, he's teaching regarding what is clean and what is unclean. But he's teaching it at the Sod level, the inner, the heart level. So what is the real heart meaning of that which is clean before the God of Israel and that which is unclean? So ultimately what Yeshua is explaining here is that one that has a wicked or an evil heart cannot make himself clean by outwardly washing his hands. That is the point that he is going to make here. So in Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, where he says, not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. In Job chapter 14, verse 4, is the principle that Yeshua is trying to teach here. And it says, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. So now we're going to begin, since we understand the principle of the way in which Yeshua is going to teach the Torah, that there's an expectation that the Messiah, when he comes, he's going to be teaching the heart of the Torah, and that is what Yeshua is doing here in Matthew in chapter 15. So now we're going to connect what he says in Matthew chapter 15 verse 11 with Matthew chapter 15 verse 18, which says, not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. Those things which proceed out of the mouth comes forth from the heart. And it's the things from the heart that's in the heart. This defiles the man. Now, if we're going to look at Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, we need to look at the context. So we got to go back to the beginning of the chapter in Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, which says, then came Yeshua, scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? Now, the tradition of the elders is a reference to the oral Torah. It's not a reference to the written Torah itself. It was the Pharisees who was asking the question. In the way in which the Pharisees seek to follow the Torah is they believe that at Mount Sinai there was not only the written Torah given, but there was an oral Torah that was given as well. And the rabbis were given the authority to interpret the written, and they refer to Deuteronomy chapter 17 verses 8 through 11 as the rabbinical authority to be able to give the understanding of the written text. And therefore, what the rabbis rule is to be followed by the people. And this is the way in which a Pharisee is going to seek to follow the Torah. And so the Pharisees here are seeing that the disciples of Yeshua, that they are not in all instances following and doing what the rabbis are teaching regarding the way in which you follow the Torah. Meaning, they are not always following the oral Torah. So that's the question that gets asked of Yeshua's disciples by the Pharisees unto Yeshua. And the particular claim is that the disciples of Yeshua do not always wash their hands when they eat bread. So why was this an issue here for the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 and 2? Well, we need to understand more fully and completely the mindset of the Pharisees and those who were asking Yeshua the question. From the Wikipedia Encyclopedia, the Pharisees, from the Hebrew parashim, from the Hebrew word parash, meaning to separate, were, depending on the time, a political party, a social movement, and a school of thought among Jews that flourished during the Second Temple era, which is 536 before the Common Era to the year 70. After the destruction of the Second Temple, Pharisaic Judaism came to be known as Rabbinic Judaism, and then simply as Judaism. The Pharisees were an ancient sect of Judaism. They existed during the time of rabbis Hillel the elder and Shammai, and during the time of Jesus. They are the direct predecessor to what eventually became known as Rabbinic Judaism. So the Pharisees of the first century, they were the ones who ended up writing the Talmud, and those who wrote the Talmud and followed the Talmud today we call Orthodox Jews or Rabbinic Judaism, and sometimes it's just shortened to mean Judaism. Continuing on and explaining the Pharisees of the first century from the Wikipedia Encyclopedia, in contrast to other Jewish groups of the time, such as the Sadducees, the Pharisees held or believed that the books of the Tanakh, or the written text, which we call the Hebrew Scriptures, have always been transmitted in parallel with an oral tradition. They pointed as proof to the text of the Torah itself, where they said many words were left undefined and many procedures mentioned without explanation or instruction. The reader is assumed to be familiar with the details from other sources. This parallel set of material was originally transmitted orally and came to be known as the oral law. By the year 200, much of this material was edited together into the Mishnah, which is the core document of Rabbinic Judaism. So if you followed the Torah of the Pharisees, or today we would say the Torah of the rabbis, they view following the Torah by putting the oral Torah or the rulings of the rabbis above the written commandments or the written text. Or another way of seeing it, they teach that you cannot know how to follow the written text without their teaching and their instruction and their rulings. So therefore, they teach that their teachings, instructions, and rulings are superior to the written text or supersedes it. In the Torah Anthology, in commentary to Deuteronomy, volume 17, page 32, in Rabbinic Judaism or oral law, you must wash your hands before you eat, even if your hands do not need to be washed because they are clean. Ritual washing of both hands before a meal containing bread is mandatory, even if one's hands are immaculate or do not need washed because they are clean. So this is the background and the things we need to know in order to understand what's going on in Luke in chapter 11, beginning in verse 37, where Yeshua is having a meal with a Pharisee. And as he, that is, Yeshua spake, a certain Pharisee besought him to dine with him, and he went in and sat down to eat with him. And when the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. You see, the Pharisee was under the impression that Yeshua was following the Torah the way he understood to follow the Torah, which was according to the oral law, which means if you had a meal where you had bread, that you would always wash your hands. But so Yeshua is having a meal with the Pharisee. They're obviously having bread because the Pharisee wants to wash his hands, but Yeshua doesn't wash his hands, and so the Pharisee is astonished. He marvels that Yeshua did not wash his hands before he ate. And so it was in this context that Yeshua stated these words in Luke chapter 11, verse 39. And the Lord said to him, "Now do you Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup." He's referring to the washing of the physical hands in the platter, "but your inward part, that is your heart, is full of ravening and wickedness." So Yeshua is teaching clean and unclean at the sod level. And so the reason why the Pharisees were washing their physical hands before they ate is because it was taught that's the way that you are clean in eating your meal. But Yeshua said if you wash your hands outwardly, but your heart is still evil or wicked, then you're really not clean even though you physically wash your hands. And so that is the point that he is trying to teach. He's teaching the sod meaning of clean and unclean. So in the written Torah, does it require that you must wash your hands before you eat? The answer is no. Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Then came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do your disciples, because Yeshua's disciples are being taught Torah by him, and the Pharisees are going to wash their hands before they eat if they're eating bread, but Yeshua's disciples don't do this. So they ask, why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? That is the oral law, the teaching of the rabbis, for they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. So Yeshua answered this way. And in doing so, Yeshua is going to take the opportunity to teach what he sees as having clean hands. He's going to teach the heart, the sod meaning of what it means to be clean before the God of Israel. So Matthew chapter 15, verse 3 and verse 9, Yeshua answered and said, why do you transgress the commandment of God, meaning that which is written, by your tradition or your interpretation? So Yeshua goes on here in Matthew 15 to give an example what the written says, and they're ruling on that which is written, and thus Yeshua is making the point that they're violating the heart of the commandment that is written. And then he goes on to say in verse 9, but in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. And there he's referring to the oral Torah. And so Yeshua is teaching that that which is clean is following the written Torah and worshiping him, because he's explaining that the way that the Pharisees are seeking to follow the Torah, that causes them to worship Yeshua in vain or the incorrect way, because they're teaching for doctrines, the way you follow the Torah, the commandments of men or the interpretation of the rabbis, that in certain instances violates the heart of the Torah. And given that Yeshua gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, it says in James chapter 4, verse 12, there is one lawgiver that is able to save. Yeshua is the one that saves. Matthew chapter 1, verse 21, Luke chapter 2, verse 11. And the one that saves is the lawgiver. And so given that Yeshua gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, he is able to give the correct understanding and the heart meaning of those things that were given to Moses to give to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. And because it's an expectation that when Messiah comes, he's going to teach the sod of the Torah, reveal the inner meaning of it, this is what Yeshua is doing here. And he's using the opportunity to teach on what it means to have clean hands before the God of Israel. Because in Psalm, in chapter 24, it says in verses 3 and 4, who shall ascend unto the hill of the Lord? And who will stand in his holy place? He that has clean hands and a pure heart. So the one that stands before the Lord has clean hands and a pure heart. And so in essence, the clean hands before the God of Israel is having a pure heart before him. And this is the point that Yeshua is making here in Matthew in chapter 15. Now, if we look at the context of Matthew chapter 15, verse 11, our verse in question that is often quoted to try to make the argument that in being believers in Yeshua as the Messiah, being a part of his new covenant family, that we can eat anything that we want. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 10, Yeshua called the multitude and said, "Hear and understand. Not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man." So we can tell then in Matthew chapter 15, verse 15, that Peter did not take the words of Yeshua literally to mean that he was teaching them that they could eat anything they want, because Peter's response to the words of Yeshua was, "Declare unto us this parable." So Peter called Yeshua's words, "Not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man." He called those words a parable, meaning they were not to be taken literally, but there was a deeper meaning that Yeshua was teaching by saying those words. In the Art Scroll of Genesis, in the introduction on page 41, the rabbis teach that the oral Torah was taught at Mount Sinai. The oral law was taught in its entirety to Moses during his 40 days and 40 nights in heaven. In the Soncino Midrash Rabbah, volume 6, page 736, the rabbis teach that the Talmud was given at Mount Sinai. They were all given to Moses on Sinai, and they contain statutes and ordinances: Torah, Mishnah, Talmud, and Agada. In the Soncino Midrash Rabbah, volume 6, page 613, the rabbis teach that the oral Torah or the Mishnah is superior or greater or supersedes the written text. The Mishnah, which is greater than the Scripture. So, given that this was the perspective of the Pharisees, whom Yeshua is giving an answer to because they ask him, "Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders?" And that's a reference to following the oral law and the interpretation of how you follow the written by the rulings of the rabbis. He was not being asked in Matthew chapter 15, verse 2, "Why do you follow the Torah?" He was being asked, "Why don't the disciples follow the oral Torah?" And so when Yeshua gives his answer, he says in Matthew 15, verse 9, "But in vain they do worship me." In other words, following the Torah, by following the oral law and looking for the rabbis as your guidance on how you follow the written text, Yeshua said that that is a vain way to worship him, because they teach for doctrines, that is the way in which you're supposed to follow the Torah. They teach for doctrines the commandments of men, the rulings of the rabbis. So then Yeshua says in Matthew 15, verse 11, "Not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man." And then in Matthew 15, verse 20, "But to eat with unwashed hands defiles not a man." So what's he saying? To eat with unwashed hands. What he means is, if you are not totally following what the rabbis say, if you're not following the oral law, that doesn't cause you to sin. That doesn't cause you to be defiled. But that which proceeds out of the heart, that which is evil within the heart, that causes you to be defiled. So, in Matthew chapter 15, is Yeshua given a teaching about what food we are to eat? No. He's giving you a teaching regarding how you're supposed to follow the Torah. And his disciples, he is teaching that the way they're supposed to follow the Torah is his instructions, and ultimately, if we study other scripture, to follow the Torah by his Spirit, rather than looking for guidance on how to follow the Torah by the rulings of the rabbis and the teachings of the rabbis. That's the lesson that Yeshua is trying to teach here in Matthew chapter 15. So now we are going to show you that Yeshua is trying to teach it's an evil heart that causes one to be unclean. Matthew chapter 15, verse 2. Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders, not follow the oral law? For they wash not their hands when they eat, which, if you follow the oral law, you will wash your hands when you eat. So Yeshua says, not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man. Verse 18, but those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart. But to eat with unwashed hands, that is, to not follow the oral Torah, that isn't sin. That is not what defiles a man. So, what is Yeshua teaching is unclean. It is following the oral Torah with an evil heart. So, what is Yeshua teaching as being clean? It's following his instructions by his Spirit with a clean heart. And Yeshua is teaching in Matthew chapter 15 that if you are following the oral Torah and you're doing it with an evil heart, that you don't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah and you don't seek to follow him and his commandments, he says that you're worshiping him in vain. So why is Yeshua saying that they're worshiping him even though they're not trying to follow him? It's because he is the one that gave the Torah. And the instructions that were given at Mount Sinai were how to follow the one who gave the instructions. And that is Yeshua. So let's summarize what we have learned so far in this lesson regarding food, that is clean and unclean, and Matthew chapter 15. Number 1, the Torah tells us what may be eaten, that which is clean, and what may not be eaten, that which is unclean. The Torah defines food as that which may be eaten, or that which is clean. Number 3, Yeshua taught Torah at the sod level, that is the heart meaning or the spiritual meaning of the Torah. Number 4, when teaching Torah at the sod level, Yeshua instructs his disciples that they are to follow his Torah, that is the written Torah, with the help of the Holy Spirit, who writes the Torah upon the heart of a believer in Yeshua. That's the new covenant. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 31 and verse 33, and Hebrews in chapter 8, verse 8 and verse 10. And so this is the way you're supposed to follow the Torah, rather than seeing that the way you're supposed to follow the Torah is through Rabbinic Judaism or the oral law teaching of the Pharisees. Number 5, Yeshua taught his disciples in Matthew chapter 15 that if you follow the oral law, meaning if you wash your hands, which causes your hands to be clean, but you have an evil heart, then you are still unclean to him. Number 6, Yeshua did not teach his disciples that they can eat anything they want. He was teaching them the sod level, or the heart meaning of what it means to be clean versus unclean. Number 7, when Yeshua ate with the Pharisee who followed the oral law in Luke chapter 11, he did not wash his hands before he ate. Thus, he violated the oral law, but not the written Torah. Next, we're going to look at Acts chapter 10. We're going to look at Peter's vision, because Acts chapter 10, verses 12 and 13 are verses that are often quoted to give justification that you can eat anything that you want if you are New Testament believer in Yeshua as the Messiah. So let's look at Acts chapter 10 in its context and with its Hebraic background in perspective to see what is it in Acts chapter 10 that is being communicated to Peter. What is the point that the God of Israel is making to him? Is he trying to teach him that he can eat anything that he wants? Or is there something else? So Acts chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry, and he would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. Acts chapter 10, verse 12. Wherein what he saw in this vision were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. These are all unclean things. Acts chapter 10, verse 13. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. So was the God of Israel telling Peter through a vision that he could eat anything that he wanted? Is this the point of Acts chapter 10? Or if we read it in context and know the Hebraic background, is that going to help us to understand what's going on here? Well, I believe we need to see the context and the Hebraic background. So what is it? Acts chapter 10, verses 14 through 16, we see that Peter is instructed 3 times to eat. And Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the 2nd time, What God has cleansed, do not call common. And this was done 3 times. And the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, there's a Torah principle that when the God of Israel gives dreams or visions, that the dream or vision is a communication by the God of Israel in the form of a parable or a riddle that we are to then seek him out to understand the meaning of. Numbers chapter 12, verse 6 and verse 8, he said, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and I will speak unto him in a dream. He goes on to say how that is done. Numbers chapter 12, verse 8. In dark speeches, in the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. So dark speeches is the Strong's number 2420. And it is the Hebrew word hida. And it means a riddle or a difficult question or a parable. So when I make myself known in a vision or a dream, I will do so in the form of a riddle or a parable. So that's the first thing we need to understand in Acts chapter 10, given that Peter is being given a vision, that the vision itself is a riddle or a parable, something that is to be unraveled to understand and know the meaning that the God of Israel is trying to communicate. So if we look at the context of Peter's vision, Acts chapter 10, verses 1 and 2, it is written, There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a devout man and one that feared God with all his house. So here, Cornelius is described as being one that feared God. So what does this phraseology mean? Well, in the Bible, one that fears the God of Israel seeks to follow his Torah or keeps his commandments. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 19, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, to keep all the words of this Torah and these statutes, and to do them. In the book, The Messianic Idea in Israel by Joseph Klausner, on page 479, he explains that in the first century, there were those that were called by the Jewish community as being devout ones, fearers, God-fearers, and worshipers of God. And they are mentioned a number of times in the book of Acts and also in the writings of Josephus. These God-fearers, of which Cornelius is described as being one in Acts chapter 10, appropriated only the loftier ideas of Judaism or rabbinic Judaism or the oral law or Pharisaicism, such as belief in one God, monotheism, and the ethics or doing the socially good deeds that the prophets exhort the people to follow. Most of them kept the biblical Sabbath and did not eat swine's flesh or did not eat unclean food. But they did not observe the numerous ritual rules of Pharisaic Judaism. In other words, they were not trying to follow all of oral Torah and all the teachings of the rabbis, but they did believe in the God of Israel. They did try to keep his Sabbath, and they did try to follow and do the socially good commandments of the Torah, and they did not eat pig. These were God-fearers. So Cornelius is described as being a God-fearer, meaning he sought to follow the Torah, he didn't follow all of rabbinic Judaism, and he would not have eaten pig. So now Cornelius is instructed by an angel of the Lord to send men to see Peter. Acts chapter 10, verse 3. He saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying, Cornelius, now send men to Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodges with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside, and he shall tell you what you ought to do. Acts chapter 10, verses 7 and 8. And when the angel which spake unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. Acts chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And he became very hungry, and he would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. And he saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet, knit at the 4 corners, and let down to the earth. And so what Peter was seeing was a garment that had tassels on the 4 corners. And so a representation of this garment today is what we call a talit. And that which is on the corners, the tassels, are called tzitzit. And the purpose of the tzitzit, as we're going to see in the Torah, is for the people of the God of Israel to remember to follow the Torah or the commandments of the God of Israel. Yeshua wore fringes on the corner of his garment. In Matthew, in chapter 5, verses 25 through 27, we're going to see that the woman with the issue of blood, when she stretched out her hand, that she grabbed the fringes or the corner of Yeshua's garment, the tzitzit. Mark chapter 5, verses 25 through 27. And a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing better, but rather grew worse. When she had heard of Yeshua, she came in the press behind and touched his garment. And so what was on the corner of his garment was fringes or tassels, in Hebrew, tzitzit. There's a commandment in the Torah to wear fringes or tassels on the corner of your garment. Number chapter 15, beginning in verse 37. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and bid them that they make fringes in the borders of their garments throughout their generations, and that they put upon the fringe of the borders a ribbon of blue. And it shall be upon you for a fringe, that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them. And that you seek not after your own heart in your own eyes, after which you used to go a-whoring. That you remember to do all my commandments, and be holy unto your God. Mark chapter 5, verses 28 and 29. For she said, If I may touch his clothes. And so what she's touching is the tzitzit, which represents keeping the commandments or the Torah of the God of Israel. So what's being represented here in the act of the woman with the issue of blood is that she's reaching out to follow the Torah of Yeshua, because she says, if I would touch his clothes, the deeper meaning is follow his Torah, I shall be whole. Verse 29, and straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. In Acts chapter 10, verse 12, in Peter's vision, he sees unclean animals, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. Now, in order to understand the meaning of these unclean animals and what Peter is seeing and what the God of Israel wants him to do, we have to understand from the book of Hosea the judgment that was put upon the northern kingdom for departing from the Torah. And the northern kingdom was taken captive by the Assyrians. In 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 29, it is written, In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and he took various places, including Gilead and Galilee, which is the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. Now in Hosea, in chapter 1, we are told about a marriage between Hosea and Gomer, and 3 children that are mentioned in Hosea chapter 1 as a result of this marriage. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. The Lord said to Hosea, Go take you a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land is committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. Now the names of these 3 children in Hosea chapter 1 are going to be prophecies of the judgment that is being declared upon the northern kingdom. And so the first child in Hosea chapter 1:4 is to be named Jezreel. And Jezreel means God will sow or God will scatter. That the northern kingdom is going to be scattered into the nations of the world, and the God of Israel is going to regard them as being seed that he's sowing into the nations. The second child that is born from this marriage that is mentioned in Hosea chapter 1 is named in Hosea chapter 1 verse 6, Lo Ruhama. Lo in Hebrew means not, Ruhama means mercy. So the second child is named No Mercy. Now the third child is named in Hosea chapter 1 verse 9, Lo Ami. Lo in Hebrew means not, Am means people, Ami is my people, not my people. So I'm going to scatter you in the nations of the world, I'm not going to show you mercy, and you are not my people. So that is how judgment is being proclaimed. But in the same chapter, the God of Israel promises comfort and restoration. Because in Hosea chapter 1 verse 10 it says, Yet, even though no mercy, not my people, yet The number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it will come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people. Where is it being said that you are not my people? Right here in the book of Hosea, I'm proclaiming the judgment upon the northern kingdom, that it will be said, you are the sons of the living God. So who is the son of the living God? John chapter 1 verse 12 explains that a son of the living God is one that believes that Yeshua is the Messiah. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. Now in Ezekiel, in chapter 8, we are being told about the sins of the children of Israel. And in committing their sins, their whoredom, their idolatry, that what they're doing in their abominations are being associated with creeping things and abominable beasts. Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 6, verses 9 and 10, it is written, he said, furthermore unto me, son of man, see thou what they do, even the great abominations that the house of Israel commits here, that I should go far off from my sanctuary? But turn thee yet again, and you will see greater abominations. And he said unto me, go in and behold the wicked abominations that they do here. So I went in and saw, and behold, every form of creeping things and abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed upon the wall round about. And so, in portraying the idols of the house of Israel, that what they're doing is being described in poetic terms as being creeping things and abominable things. So, in Peter's vision, the creeping and abominable things is associated with departing from the Torah, and it's associated with going after idols. Now back to the northern kingdom in the book of Hosea. In Hosea chapter 9 verse 3, in departing from Torah, in being given the judgment of being scattered in the nations of the world, in being taken captive by the Assyrians, it says in Hosea chapter 9 verse 3, that they shall not dwell in the Lord's land, but Ephraim will return to Egypt and will eat unclean things in Assyria. In Psalm 115, verse 4 and verse 8, we have a biblical principle. You become what you worship. You become what you idolize. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They that make them are like unto them. They that make idols are like the idols. And how were the idols portrayed in Ezekiel chapter 8? As creeping things and abominable beasts. The same things that Peter saw in his vision. Now, in the restoration of the northern kingdom, they had departed from Torah. They are eating unclean things in Assyria. They are going after their idols. And so you become what you idolize. And so in going after idols, these are abominations. You are in effect going after unclean things, creeping things, abominable beasts. And so their spiritual status in departing from the Torah and going after other gods and idols is they have the status of being unclean. They have the status of being creepy things, abominable things, fowls of the air. And so that's their status when the northern kingdom is prophesied regarding their return to Yeshua. And in returning to Yeshua, they're going to be returning to the new covenant that he's going to be making when he sheds his blood on the tree. Hosea chapter 2 verse 18. And in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, with the fowls of the heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground. And I will betroth you unto me forever. I will betroth you unto me in righteousness, in judgment, and in loving kindness, and in mercies. I will even betroth you unto me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. So this is a background which we need to understand and realizing what the God of Israel is wanting to communicate to Peter. And so Peter is a disciple of Yeshua. And being a disciple of Yeshua, we saw in Matthew chapter 15 that Yeshua taught Peter that the way in which you're supposed to follow the Torah is to follow what he is teaching his disciples, and you're not to always follow the tradition of the elders or the oral law. And so if we read some of the things that Peter is doing, and this is one of the things that Paul confronted him with, that Peter was influenced by social pressure. And so when he was among the Pharisees or the Orthodox Jews, he tended to try to do those things that helped him to fit in with them. But when he wasn't around them, then he would behave in a different manner. And so one of the teachings of the Pharisees, or one of the teachings of the rabbis of the oral law, is that you were not to go into the house of a non-Jew and eat, because they may not be keeping a kosher kitchen. And so in order to not risk eating with a non-Jew that would be unclean or eating unclean things, the rabbis put what's called a fence around the Torah. And they gave a instruction that you were not even to go into the house of a non-Jew. And so this is not what Yeshua taught, but yet this is what Peter was doing, and this is what he was being hung up about. And so the God of Israel wants to give him instruction to tear down this fence that he was following, because he, for fear of the Jews around him, he was following some of their teachings and their ways and not being wholly submitted and committed to Yeshua and his teachings. So this is what Acts chapter 10 is about. Acts chapter 10 verse 13. And there came a voice to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." So at surface, it seems to be saying that Peter is to eat all these unclean things. But you can only understand what Peter is given instruction to do only from a Torah perspective. Because the word kill here is the Strong's number 2380, and it means to sacrifice, to slaughter, and it's the word that is used to kill the Passover lamb. And one of the reasons for killing a Passover lamb is to have a meal. So the Greek word here doesn't just generically mean to kill something. It has the context of killing something to have a meal following killing that thing which you are killing in order to eat. So how do we take this back to putting it into Torah context? In Genesis chapter 31 verse 54, it says, "Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren to eat bread." And so the word sacrifice here is the Strong's number 2077 in the Hebrew dictionary. It's the Hebrew word zabak. So in offering sacrifice, zabak, once making the sacrifice, zabak, then there was a meal that was eaten that there was bread eaten with a group. And so this is the context of the usage of this word zabak. So in Acts chapter 10, verse 13, Peter is not only told to kill, which now in Hebrew it is zabak, but also to eat. In Leviticus, in chapter 3, verse 1, it is written, if his oblation, this is the Hebrew word korban, which means an offering to draw near to the God of Israel. If his korban be a zabak. And so if you're making an offering to the God of Israel for the purpose of worship and drawing near to him, that's the context of Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1. And if his oblation, korban, be a sacrifice, zabak, of a peace offering, shalem. Now, what is a peace offering? Shalem, it's the Strong's number 8002. And it means a peace offering, or it means a sacrifice for alliance or friendship. So, we can read Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1. If your korban, drawing near to the God of Israel, be a zabak for the purpose of having a covenantal meal, or if it be and for the purposes of alliance or friendship. And so this is actually then what Peter is being instructed to do, to draw near to the God of Israel by killing or eating. And this is the spiritual thing that the God of Israel is calling him to do in greeting Cornelius's men and ultimately eating in their house. Now, Leviticus chapter 3, verses 1 through 3. If his oblation, if his korban, be a sacrifice, zabak, of a peace offering, shalem, which is an act of drawing near to the God of Israel by killing an animal, and then once killing the animal, you're going to have a sacrificial meal or an alliance or a friendship meal. This is what you're to do. He shall lay his hand upon the head of his offering and kill it. And he shall offer of the sacrifice of the peace offering an offering made by fire unto the Lord. Now Acts chapter 10, verses 14 through 16. Peter said, not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, what God has cleansed, do not call common. This was done 3 times, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, in Acts chapter 10, verse 17, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, you see, in Matthew, in chapter 15, and verse 11, when Yeshua said, not that which goes into the mouth defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. And Peter did not take that literally. In Matthew chapter 15, verse 15, Peter answered and said, declare unto us this parable. So once again, Peter didn't take this vision literally, because in Acts chapter 10, verse 17, Peter doubted what it meant because he knew he was not to eat unclean. Acts chapter 10, verse 19, while Peter thought on the vision, or what the meaning of it was, the Spirit said unto him, behold, 3 men seek you. Arise and get you down and go with them, doubting nothing. Now, what is it that Peter is instructed not to doubt? He's to not doubt going with the 3 men who is seeking to meet him. So obviously, without the vision, Peter would have doubted about going with them, and those who are coming to see Peter, they are non-Jews. So why would have Peter doubted? Because Peter had in his mind an attitude toward the non-Jew of rabbinic Judaism or Phariseeism. In Acts chapter 10, verse 21, then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius and said, Behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause wherefore you are come? Verse 28, and he said unto them, You know how it is an unlawful thing, that is, a violation of rabbinic oral law, for a man that is a Jew to keep company or to be in the house or to have a meal with one of another nation. In other words, eat with someone who is not Jewish. Well, the written Torah doesn't say that you cannot do that, but that is a teaching of the Pharisees. That is a teaching of the oral law. Yeshua didn't teach Peter that he's not to eat with a non-Jew, but the Pharisees would. And so Peter has a mindset to follow what the Pharisees are teaching on the issue and not what Yeshua taught. In Leviticus, in chapter 20, verse 25, we have the principle that the Torah commands that there be a difference or a distinction made between that which is clean and unclean. You shall therefore put difference between clean beasts and between unclean fowls and clean. And you shall not make your souls abominable by beast or by fowl or by any manner of living thing that creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. In Pirkei Avot 1:1, that is the sayings of the fathers, and Pharisaicism or Rabbinic Judaism or Orthodox Judaism, they see that you are to put a fence around the Torah. Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua. Joshua transmitted it to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. They, that is the men of the great assembly, said three things: be deliberate in judgment, raise many students, and make a protective fence for the Torah. So there is a rabbinical fence for Jews in being instructed to not associate with non-Jews. So in the Talmud, in Avodah Zarah 37 through 43, I read a commentary on the weekly daf put out by Or Zameach, an Orthodox organization, and specifically Rabbi Mendel Weinbach. The conclusion of the Gemara is that the prohibition against food cooked by a non-Jew is of rabbinic origin, either to discourage intimacy in dining with the non-Jew, which may lead to eating their non-kosher food, this is what Rashi says, or to discourage the social contact, which may lead to intermarriage, and this is what Tosafot says. Now in Acts chapter 10, verse 28, Peter said to them, You know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come into one of another nation. And so it's unlawful according to the rabbis, according to rabbinic Judaism, not according to the written text. And it's certainly not something that Yeshua would have taught Peter, because Yeshua gave commandments to his disciples to go out into all the world and to make disciples of all nations and to teach all nations the Torah that he taught them. But it goes on to say in Acts chapter 10, verse 28, But God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So this then is the purpose and the understanding of the vision that Peter is given, that he would have doubted going and being in company with and going into the house of and eating with Cornelius and his men, being non-Jews, but the God of Israel is trying to bring down this fence that was in the Jewish society, and the fence that was in Peter's mind. And so he was instructed by the Spirit to go with the three men and do not doubt. Do not think that you're violating the Torah. Because Cornelius is a God-fearer. He believes in the God of Israel. He seeks to keep the Sabbath. He doesn't eat pig. And he seeks to follow the social teachings of the Torah. That is, to be kind to others and to help those who are in need, to help the widow and the orphan, etc. This and these are the things that Cornelius would have followed. So the God of Israel sees Cornelius and his men as being clean before him. So therefore he wanted Peter to see them as being clean also. So in Acts chapter 10, verse 28, Peter said, God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean. In the art scroll of Ezekiel, page 30, it explains that in Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 31, it is written, and you, my flock, the flock of my pasture, are men, and I am your God, says the Lord God. So this word men is Adam. And so the sheep of his pasture, the children of Israel, are called Adam, but Adam is also a term for all mankind. And when Yeshua called his disciples, he said in Matthew chapter 4, verse 19, follow me, I will make you fishers of men. I will make you fishers of my people who are in exile, and I'll make you fishers of all mankind. And in order to fish for them, you need to also eat with them. And so the God of Israel is going to send his disciples out into the nations, and Peter is not going to be able to successfully carry on this task if he's not willing to eat with non-Jews. If he regards them as being unclean and can't fellowship with, how then is he going to share with them regarding Yeshua and his redemptive work and invite them to receive in their heart Yeshua and his shed blood for the forgiveness of their sins? So let's summarize Acts chapter 10 and the understanding of Peter's vision from a Hebraic context. The God of Israel gave Peter a vision, and in the vision he saw unclean things. According to the Torah, the message of a prophetic vision is given by the God of Israel in the form of a parable or a riddle. In Peter's case, this was the spiritual meaning of the vision. Peter was playing the prophetic role of rabbinic Judaism and how they viewed the Torah as it relates to the non-Jew. The God of Israel wants rabbinic Judaism to accept and have table fellowship with non-Jews who love the God of Israel, who believes in the God of Israel, who seeks to follow his ways, who seeks to follow his Torah. And this would include non-Jewish Ephraimites, that is, the brothers of the Jewish people, who were exiled into the nations of the world and was taken into captivity by the Assyrians. And in going into Assyrian captivity, they ultimately ate unclean things in Assyria. Hosea chapter 9 and verse 3. So Peter is being given instruction by the God of Israel that as a way of drawing near to him, that he should have table fellowship, which is a shalem, a peace offering with non-Jews who endeavor to be followers and believers in the God of Israel. And this is, in effect, inviting non-Jews to participate in the family of fellowship, the shalom or the peace offering that Yeshua is offering to not only the Jewish people but the non-Jewish people as well through the redemptive work of Yeshua the Messiah. In Acts chapter 10, Peter is not given a vision to make him aware that he can now begin eating unclean food. Next, we're going to look at Acts in chapter 15. And among the four things that are given as a ruling, of those things which non-Jews are to observe and practice in being believers in the God of Israel, in Acts chapter 15, verse 20, it is written, "But that we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols, from fornication, from things strangled, and from blood." So, among the four things that are given to the non-Jews in the practicing of their faith, that they are to abstain from things strangled. Now, the word strangled here is the Greek number 4156, and it means the proper way in which you kill an animal. And this is going to refer to kosher slaughter. So, one of the instructions that is given to the non-Jews in the way that they're to practice their faith in Yeshua the Messiah is they are to abstain from things strangled, or they're to make sure that when an animal is killed, it's to be properly killed, and thus in eating the meat of that animal, the Torah also commands that you abstain from eating blood. So the ruling here is that you're not only abstaining from things strangled, but from blood as well. So this pertains to the things that you eat. Holiness is linked with not eating forbidden food. Leviticus chapter 11, verse 45 and verse 47. "For I am the Lord that brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. To make a difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten." Strangers or non-Jews are commanded to forsake eating blood. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 10. "And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel or of the strangers that sojourn among you that eats any manner of blood, I will even set my face against that soul that eats blood and will cut him off from among his people." And so, in the ruling that is given here in Acts chapter 15, verse 20, which includes to abstain from things strangled and from blood, and in obedience to doing that, you would be eating food that is properly killed, and you would not be eating the blood of that animal. So there's instruction here to the non-Jew regarding eating things that are clean before the God of Israel. And then Acts chapter 15 verse 21 goes on to say, "For Moses of old time has in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath day." In other words, this is the baseline which you're to follow, but as you are instructed in the Torah in each week, you will learn and understand and know how to follow more. So let's look at the summary of Acts chapter 15, the non-Jew and food. In Acts chapter 15, non-Jews who believe that Yeshua is the Messiah is to abstain from eating things strangled, which is the improper way of killing an animal which is clean, and to abstain from eating blood. In Leviticus, the God of Israel instructs both the native-born and the sojourner, or the non-Jew, to eat clean food, which includes animals which are properly killed, but to not eat blood. Next, we're going to look at 1st and 2nd Timothy and what Paul taught to Timothy concerning food. And in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, 3 through 5, it is written, "Now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith." So what would be departing from the faith? It's departing from believing that Yeshua is the Messiah and departing from following his Torah by his Spirit. So in departing from the faith, they would command people to abstain from meats or food which God has created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. Notice he's speaking about those who believe and know the truth. Food, as it relates to those which believe in Yeshua as Messiah and also know the truth, that nothing is to be refused if it be received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3, when it says commanding to abstain from meats, this is the Strong's number 1033 in the Greek dictionary. It's the Greek word broma. It means that which is eaten or food. Now in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 and verse 13, it is written, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving, and they shall turn away their ears." In the last day, evil men shall turn away their ears. What does this mean? It's a expression that refers to turning people from the Torah. That is because we are to give ear to the Torah. Psalm 78 verse 1, "Give ear, O my people, to my Torah. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth." Now in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 1 and verse 13, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving." And how are they going to deceive? 2 Timothy chapter 4 verse 4, "They shall turn away their ears." And so you're going to give your ear to the Torah. So if you turn away your ears, you're departing from the Torah. And so you're turning away your ears from the truth. So what do you do when you turn away your ears from the truth? Well, the Torah and keeping the commandments of God are truth. Psalm 119 verse 142, "Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your Torah is the truth." Psalm 119 verse 151, "You are near, O Lord, and all your commandments are truth." The Torah is truth, the commandments are truth. Malachi chapter 2 verse 1 and verse 6, "And now, O ye priests, this commandment is for you." The Torah of truth was in his mouth. So now let's look again the instructions that Paul is given to Timothy. In 1 Timothy 4:1, he gives warning that the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times, the end of days, some shall depart from the faith. So it's departing from following Messiah by following his Torah. Because Paul followed Yeshua, he followed the Torah, he did it by his Spirit. 2 Timothy 3:1, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth." And so that is the evil men, are trying to convince people that in believing in Yeshua to not follow the Torah, to turn their ears from the truth. The truth is the Torah, or the commandments of God. Timothy was taught the Torah from a child. 2 Timothy 1:1. Paul, verse 2, to Timothy. 2 Timothy 3:15. And that from a child you have known the Holy Scriptures. So the Holy Scriptures is the Torah and the prophets and the writings, the Hebrew Scriptures. Now, since we see that Paul is giving instruction to Timothy that in the last days, evil men would be telling others to not follow the Torah, now we're going to look at 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1 and verse 3. Now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, that is, departing from not only believing in Yeshua as the Messiah, but departing from following Yeshua by keeping his commandments or following his Torah. In other words, they will be teaching to believe in Yeshua, but not follow his instructions, to not follow his Torah. Now verse 3. What are they doing in seducing those to depart from the faith? They are commanding to abstain from meats which God has created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. And so, in departing from the faith, they are telling people to abstain from doing something which those who believe and know the truth have an understanding of. And so if you know the truth, if you know the Torah teaches that there's clean and unclean. And you're to eat that which is clean, and you're to not eat that which is unclean. So how in the last days are there those who's trying to instruct others to depart from the faith? They are doing so by telling them to abstain from eating biblically clean food. They are telling people to abstain from eating biblically clean food. They're telling them to abstain from food which God has created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. So what is the food that is to be received with thanksgiving of those that believe in Yeshua but also know the truth, that also know the Torah? Well, those meats that they are to be received, if you know the truth, is clean food. And so in the end of days, there would be evil men that would tell people to abstain from doing that, to abstain from eating clean food, to abstain from eating food that those who know the truth receive with thanksgiving. And so departing from the faith in the end of days comes through people telling believers in Yeshua to eat anything they want. Continuing on in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, that nothing is to be refused. The context is, nothing is to be refused by those who know the truth and follow the Torah if it be received with thanksgiving. For it, that is, food eaten by those who know the truth, that means those who believe that Yeshua is the Messiah and follow his Torah, that it is sanctified by the word of God and prayer. So what is the summary of Paul's instructions to Timothy? Number 1, Timothy was taught the scriptures, the Torah. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. Number 2, those that know the truth, and the Torah is truth, all the commandments are truth. Psalm 119, verse 142, and Psalm 119, verse 151. Those that know the truth or follow the Torah and know the difference between clean and unclean are to eat their food with thanksgiving because it is sanctified by being clean. Number 3, in the last days, evil men will turn others away from following the truth, that is the Torah, by saying that you can eat anything you want without the restrictions which the Torah teaches. So this concludes our study on food and the New Testament. And in doing so, we looked at Matthew chapter 15, Acts chapter 10, Acts chapter 15, and Paul's instructions to Timothy in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy. And we looked at those scriptures which are often quoted to say that the New Testament teaches that you can eat anything you want. That when Yeshua gave us the new covenant, he permitted us to eat anything that we want, including pig and shrimp and lobster. But when we go back to these scriptures and look at it in context, in the Hebraic context, in Matthew, in chapter 15, in verse 11, Yeshua wasn't teaching that you can eat anything that you want. He was giving an instruction, especially to his disciples, the difference between following his teachings by his Spirit versus what the general Jewish community was doing around him, which is seeking to follow Torah through the decrees of the rabbis in their rulings, which Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 15, verse 9, is a vain way of worshiping him. And then he was teaching in Matthew chapter 15 the sod, or the heart meaning of the Torah, and that what God desires is that our hearts be clean, and that he prefers that our hearts are clean rather than washing our hands and making our hands clean before him before we eat our meal. And then in Acts chapter 10, we have Peter's vision, and Peter's not being instructed in Acts chapter 10, verses 12 and 13, to eat anything that he wants. Peter had in his mind that he was not permitted to eat with non-Jews, and this was a teaching of rabbinic Judaism, of the oral law. And the God of Israel wanted to bring down that fence, and so he gave instruction to Peter that it was okay for him to go eat with Cornelius and those that Cornelius sent to Peter, that Cornelius was a God-fearer. He believed in the God of Israel. He kept the Sabbath. He did not eat pig. And so Cornelius and those that he sent were regarded as being clean in the eyes of the God of Israel. So therefore, Peter should feel comfortable in eating with them. That was the message that the God of Israel was trying to communicate to Peter in Acts chapter 10. Then, in Acts chapter 15 and verse 20, in the ruling regarding the non-Jews, that what non-Jews were instructed to do as a part of believing in Yeshua the Messiah is they were to abstain from things strangled and from blood. And abstaining from things strangled refers to the correct way that you're to kill an animal and eating that animal. And in abstaining from blood, you're not to eat blood. And so instruction was given to the stranger in the Torah, in the book of Leviticus, that the stranger was not to eat blood. So once again, Acts chapter 15 is not being understood in its correct context, that if it was, we see that there it's giving instruction to believers in Yeshua as the Messiah to not just eat anything, but to eat biblically clean food and to not eat the blood. And then in 1 Timothy and 2 Timothy, Paul is giving instructions to Timothy, and he warns that in the last days there will be those who will depart from the faith. And the faith is not only believing in Yeshua as the Messiah, but it's departing from Yeshua's Torah that he gave at Mount Sinai. And in departing from the faith, they would give commandment or instruction to others that they should abstain from food that God has given to those who believe and know the truth, that is, those who believe in Yeshua and follow his Torah, to be received with thanksgiving. They're commanding that you abstain from those foods that those who believe and know the truth are eating and are receiving with thanksgiving. And so, in departing from the faith, there are those who are teaching to abstain from following eating biblically clean food, and thus telling people that they can eat anything that they want. So Paul is given warning to Timothy that in the end of days this will be the case. So in looking at what the New Testament says about food, we see that it is consistent with the Torah. And one who believes that Yeshua is Messiah is to follow his Torah, which means we are to eat biblically clean food, and we are to follow his Torah by his Spirit. And so Yeshua gave us his indwelling Holy Spirit when he went to be with the Father. In John chapter 16, verse 13, the Holy Spirit is called the Spirit of truth, who will lead us and guide us in truth. And truth is following the Torah, Psalm 119, verse 142. And truth is keeping the commandments of God, Psalm 119, verse 151. Yeshua is the truth, John 14, verse 6. So following the truth is following and believing in Yeshua as Messiah and keeping his Torah or keeping his commandments. And so this is why we need to always remember the words from 1 John chapter 2, verse 6, that he who says he abides in him, he who says that he's a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah, ought himself to walk. That means to live our lives even as he walked. How did Yeshua walk? How did he live his life? He followed the Torah of his Father. He ate biblically clean food. Even so, he commanded those who believe on him in John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you love me, eat biblically clean food. Shalom. In Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.